vocabulary and grammar. First, we're going to think about some of the main grammar and vocabulary we use when giving a presentation. Opening statements, some useful phrases to help us keep the presentation moving. There is also an example, and finally a role play where you will work with your partner or even with me online. So let's start. Key vocabulary. When we give a presentation, we usually have to indicate how we're going to begin. So for example, my presentation is in 3 parts. My presentation is divided into 3 main sections. A popular structure is firstly, secondly, thirdly, finally. We don't say fourthly. Firstly, secondly, thirdly, finally. To connect phrases as we are moving, we like to use I'm going to. Take a look at. I'm going to take a look at the sales figures of last month. I'm going to talk about training our people. I'm going to examine the data. I'm going to tell you something about the background. I'm going to give you some facts and figures. I'm going to fill you in on the history of our company. I'm going to concentrate on the sales of last month. I'm going to limit myself to the question of how we deliver the courses. Please feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. I'd be grateful if you could ask your questions after the presentation. This is usually the structure we use when beginning an overview for the presentation. It's important to try to make things clear for your listeners before you begin. You should practice these phrases and see which ones you like the most. They are universal, they can be applied to any topic, in any situation. Let's think about the key vocabulary a bit more. When you are talking, you will be moving through a lot of information. We need phrases to guide people, to help them. For example, I'd now like to move on to. I'd like to turn to. That's all I have to say about that. Now I'd like to look at. This leads me to the next point. These are all connectors. They are generally in the present tense, and you shouldn't worry too much about your tenses until you start talking about time and movement, which we will do in the graphs. Presenting data. Now, the language of presentations, comparing data, needs comparatives, adverbs, adjectives, and some key phrases. If you master these phrases, they will really help you when you are working professionally. Let's have a look at some of the positive phrases. When you do discuss data, there is usually a positive and a negative, which needs comparatives to give us clear information of how positive or how negative. We use adverbs such as really, beautifully, incredibly, terribly. These adverbs are words where you have a verb like terrible, and we turn it into an adverb by adding ly. Terrible, terribly. Happy, happily. Present, presently. You see how it works. Key vocabulary. Positive. Let's think about some positive phrases for how we describe a graph. So sales climbed. This is positive, they're going up. To ascend. Sales ascended dramatically. See the adverb, dramatically. To rise. Sales rose. Sales have risen. To improve. It's an improvement on last year. Sales have improved. To recover. A recovery. We expect a recovery in June. We have recovered. To increase. We increased sales last month. Sales have increased. Sales have climbed over the past 2 years. We've experienced a climb in sales. Consumer confidence recovered in the second quarter. There has been an increase of 20% since June. This is the positive. You don't need to master every single word, but it's wise to have at least 3 or 4 prepared so you don't repeat yourself. Instead of saying up and down, you can use phrases like climbed, ascended, recovered, increased. You will sound much more professional when you use these phrases. But sometimes things are not positive. Sometimes things are negative. So let's have a look at the negative vocabulary. To fall. A fall in sales. To decline. A decline in production, productivity. To plunge. To plunge means when something moves very fast. You plunge into the water. Sales plunged in May. To decrease. This is a slow decline. Something's going down slowly. There was a decrease. This doesn't tell us it's too quick. A fall is usually fast. To worsen. This is again something gradually going down. Not good. To deteriorate. This again is something negative happening, usually gradually. Sales deteriorated. Think of these phrases. Research and development spending has fallen by 30% since January. Unfortunately, we've seen a decline over the past 3 months. As you can see, sales have plunged this month. Government spending has decreased by 45% over the past 2 years. There's been a slip in profits this past quarter. Car sales have deteriorated for 3 quarters. So no good news there. But when you are talking about data, everything's going up and down, and sometimes not doing anything at all. Let's have a look at a graph. Here we have a green and blue graph showing the data of some sales. Let's have a look at the green. As we can see, the green sales in April and recovered in May. What would you put there? What kind of phrase would you put there? If you look at May for the green sales, April and May, you can see that in April sales were going down. But something happened in May. Things changed. So as we can see, the green sales declined in April and recovered in May. Recover is positive. Things got better. From May, sales gradually, and in June. So from May, things change again. From May, sales rose gradually. Yes, sales rose gradually or climbed gradually. And what happens in June? This is when everything stops. They can't go any higher. So something has to stop. This is called a peak. We always call it a peak, like a mountain. So here, from May, sales rose gradually. Yes, from May, sales rose gradually. And peaked in June. After June, sales slowly